Welcome, gang, to our next session in today's NCDLCN Virtual Learning Day for our alumni. I'm so excited to welcome my friend, Brandon Blom. Did I say it right, Brandon?
You got it. You got
it. To today's session, I'm going to turn it right over to him. And thank you for being with us today, Brandon.
No, thank you guys for having me. So once again, my name is Brandon, and I'm out here in Sacramento, California. I was a middle school math teacher and then elementary principal for the last 4 years. And then this year I started a role at the district office as Director of Educational Technology. But within that, it's really cool. Our board goal around technology isn't just around, we want kids to have access, but it's actually a board goal around how do we use technology to increase the use of the 4 C's. So it's truly a passion of mine, and I'll go through kind of the why. We'll talk about defining that for teachers and students. And then the last part of the presentation is really just giving different ideas, kind of looking at, hey, this is what maybe we went through in school and what's something we could do differently to increase the 4 C's. So anything that I have in the presentation, please feel free to use. I've stolen from other people. Just one of those things. I'm a big believer that if there's something, like, you can take this whole presentation, I know there's probably admin in here, coaches. If you want to use the whole presentation with your staff, just go for it. You don't need to ask me permission. Make those, students in North Carolina, the more 4 C's, the better. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get into the presentation. Do this real quick. All right. There's also some technology pieces we'll try doing in here, and if they work, great, and if not, we'll move on. But we'll try it. So let's see here. So, all right. So once again, there's my Twitter handle. If you ever want to reach out, or if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter at Brandon K. Blom. So learning objectives, 2 things really is to clearly define the 4 C's, which I know a lot of people think they know. Like, I've done this, and then when we especially talk about creativity, there's a lot of different definitions. And then when we score, we're going to score some activities. And if you do some of the activities that get a low score on the 4 C's, doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just, when I did this with my staff and when I've done it now with the whole district, it's just to get us to be more reflective and what can we do differently. So let's see here. So, I always talk about with teachers, if you look at this, where it says foundational literacies, this is the stuff we usually focus on in education, right? I mean, that's the stuff that, at least in California, literacy and numeracy, that's what our state gives an exam on. However, if you look at the middle column, the competencies, these are things that we haven't traditionally focused on, at least recently in education. And I shouldn't speak because I know we have a different audience, but at least I'll just speak for California. It's been, if a kid struggles in math, let's just give them 3 hours of math. Let's give them 3 hours of language arts, and we don't give them other opportunities to show these skills. So, it's just one of those things that I'm going to show why I feel these are so important and what we can do to help that. Let's see here. Sorry, at least on my screen, that this slide got really messed up. There we go. I don't know if that's any better, but it's interesting. If you ever look, on social media, people put out, like, what are employers looking for? And it's amazing to me that it doesn't matter what year this study came out. If you look, the top 3 are almost always the same. So ability to work in a team structure, there's your collaboration, ability to make decisions and problem solve, critical thinking, ability to communicate. So we know that our students will need the 4 C's, yet a lot of times this isn't what we focus on. All right, so then I'm not going to play this whole video because I know we're limited on time, but I will just play a clip of it real quick. If you've never seen this video, I always compare this to, I was a math teacher, and I'd have students that brilliant, would score perfect on the state exam. But if I took a problem and I tweaked it a little bit, it wasn't exactly what we did in class. This was kind of the reaction I got. So let's see if this will work. So obviously, I mean, it goes on, you can watch it on your own, but we don't want the kids feeling like, oh, the elevator's stopped, what should I do now, right? Just take a few steps. So It's a good video to use with staff if you want that. So here are the 4 C's. You know, I know most educators are aware, but I also did this because a lot of our teachers, we did this for district, I did this presentation to TK through 8th grade teachers, and a lot of them took it back and really use this with their students to show, like, let's define these things. Now, before we get into the definitions, we're gonna see if this works. It might not, but you know, we're here for something fun. So I always talk about how it's a spectrum. It's not that we need only 4 C's, or like if you look at this on the left-hand side, traditional knowledge. We need both. We need to have both. We need to be able to have kids read and write, but then we also do need them to be able to critically think, right? And so what we're gonna do here in a minute is, this is a spectrum, and basically the way I think of it is, what do teachers need to be successful? Do they need more traditional knowledge, or do they need more of the 4 C's? What do principals need? And I know maybe some of your principals, some aren't, but you know, just what do we need to be successful? What do people working outside of education? I know that's a huge, broad category. What do our students, knowing that the world's going to be different for them, if you know we have a 2nd grader in 15 years from now, what are they going to need? Do they need more traditional knowledge, more 4 C's? Then what did we experience in elementary school? I want you to think about when you were in 2nd and 3rd grade. Did you experience sitting in a desk, you know, just traditional knowledge, or did you experience more of the 4 C's? And then what students experience in your classroom or at your school? And so the way this works, it's a 100-point scale. In the middle, so if I'm like, you know what, as a teacher, I need both, because we need to know how to teach reading, writing, math, whatever it is. So if I'm like, I need equal parts, I just put it right at 50. If I'm like, you know what, as a teacher, I need more of the 4 C's, maybe you're gonna put it on this side, I'm probably backwards for you guys, but 60. Or if I'm like, you know what, I need more traditional knowledge, you'd be on this side of 50. So I know it's a little bit weird, but once again, if you're like, I need equal parts both, you're gonna put it at 50. And then if you're more on the 4 C's, you'll put it on the side of 50 closer to 100, right? And then traditional knowledge on the other side of 50. So we'll see if this works. It might not, but if you can open another tab and go to the website menti.com. And then when you get there, you should be asked for a code. And if you put in the code 332515, it should prompt you to this. Sorry, I'll put that back up. And then you should be able, like I said, just a sliding scale. It's a great tool to use with staff to just kind of get a feel of the room. If you've never seen Mentimeter, it's just a great tool to use. I love using it when there's many different types of questions you can use. But when you're on there, if you can just, you know, like I said, 50s, I need both of them equally. 60 might be, I need a little more 4 C's. 40 might be, need a little more traditional knowledge. But go ahead and put whatever you think. And then at the end, hit submit. And then if this works right, I should be able to pull it up and show you guys not what individual people voted, but just kind of what, as a group, we think. And I always tell teachers when I do this presentation, don't overthink it. Just, you know, go with your gut, and then we'll discuss it a little more. So I'll give you guys a minute or so to try to put your scales and then hit submit at the end. Let me see, I don't want to, you know, bias anyone's vote here, but I'm going to flip over to the thing and see if I can see that people are actually getting, oh yeah, see, there we go. There we go. Keep going. We have 30 more seconds here, and then I'll flip over to that. And then while we're waiting, I can see in the comment, Alicia Ray, it is amazing those things we remember from teachers. Like someone put the comment that my teacher was really critical of your cursive A, because, you know, that's really what, you know, matters in life. But it is funny, those things. I remember those things as well. All right, so I'm gonna pull this up, and hopefully, Jennifer, you guys are able to see what I'm seeing when it comes to, all right, perfect. So, and this will fluctuate, and I've done this training now probably 20 times. And what's interesting to me is, most of the time for teachers and principals, it does fall on the side of the 4 C's. Not by much, but because like we said, we do need to know the traditional knowledge. But we also know as teachers, if we don't have good communication skills, both with students and parents, that's going to be a problem. I mean, how much of teaching is just problem solving? It's so much of teaching is just, what am I going to do in this situation? So we definitely fall on the 4 C side. The one thing that's always interesting to me is this one right here, what we experienced in elementary school. And I can just speak for myself. I had a very traditional elementary school setting where, honestly, this sounds crazy, but I couldn't tell you my fifth grade teacher's name. I never once moved from my seat. Every day, the 6 hours were the same. I sat in my seat, I got a worksheet, we did it. I don't remember anything from it. And so that's what I would call traditional knowledge. So what is good though is I feel like there is a push in education where what students experience in our classroom, we are starting to shift back. Like it is starting to be more of a balance, which is great. So thank you guys for doing that. And like I said, Mentimeter is just a good tool to use, but hopefully we aren't giving the same our students the same experience we got. Oh, one other thing I'll say on this. So it's interesting. When we've done this survey or Mentimeter with teachers in our district, the ones that are over 60, and I don't call them old, they call themselves old. I would never do that. But they're like, you know what? They were the ones that rated their experience in elementary school way closer to the 4 Cs because they remember building and having time to work with others. And so it's just interesting. There was a huge divide with them saying it was actually an interesting group. They're like, we did this. It just swung so far. So I'm glad to see it's hopefully coming back. All right. So when I do this with our teachers, like I said, I just go over the definitions just so I'm clear when I talk about communication, what I really mean. And so when we're talking about communication, it's not just too many times I think we do think if a kid stands up and talks, that's communication, which is part of it, but are they getting feedback? And did the person that we were giving that message to, did they actually hear it? And so like when we have our students present when I was a principal, we would always make sure we gave them feedback. That way they knew if their message was heard by us. So communication, it's both sending, we need to send, but did the person receive it? It does not mean you're constantly talking, right? That's not just communication. And I always give, like I said, this was more for when we did this with our fifth grade students. I gave them, this is a definition, if you want something in writing that you can clearly hold on to. All right, next, collaboration. I really want to try this bike thing on the left. I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be really hard, but, and then I love these dogs that found a way to all get their food at the same time. So collaboration, just definition we'll give on that, 2 or more people working together. And so we've talked about how it could be the whole class working on something. It could be one other person, could be a group of 4, but more than just, hey, I'm doing this on my own. Let's see here, next, creativity. Now, this is where we've had some good discussions with our teachers, and I think you would as well. When you ask them to define creativity, a lot of times we think of just art, right? Like we think of, if we're giving art creativity. And as a math teacher, I take personally when people say math is not creative, because if you're doing math right, it's very creative because you're problem solving, you're thinking outside the box. You're constantly thinking, how could I make this work? And so I like the definition that Sir Ken Robinson gives, which is creativity is a process of having original ideas that have value. And I'll give you an example of, for example, I have a second grader, and so she's starting down the road of multiplication, and in her mind she's seeing like, if I have 3 groups of 3, that equals 9, and she's gone over that. But if on her own, she did this the other day where she's we were talking about splitting up money. We were just joking around. We had an extra $200, right? We were joking about something. And on her own, she goes, but if I had $200 and I broke that apart to 4 ways, that would mean we each get $50. That is creativity, because that isn't something she's learned. And in her mind, she has now taken a number and broke it into 4 parts. And so there is creativity in math as well. And then last, good old Pooh Bear, thinking so hard, critical thinking. Critical thinking is actually pretty hard to define for me. But here are some definitions. Improving the quality of thinking by skillfully analyzing, assessing, and reconstructing it. Critical thinking is self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, and self-corrective. And for me, it's really about, when I think about, it doesn't matter if it's a kindergartner, an 8th grader, a high school senior, are we giving them time to think about the product they just gave or worked on and reflecting on it? How can I make that better? What can I do differently? So I think for critical thinking, a lot of it for me is, do we give them that time to reflect on how can I make this better? And so hopefully we're all doing that. So when I do this, we're not gonna be able to do this right now, but if you ever do this professional development, I always like to give teachers times to kind of make sense of this for themselves. And so what I do is I give them just this chart and I say, just, under communication, write whatever makes sense to you. It could be a, it could be a single word. It could be a drawing.
Brandon,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we got a bunch of feedback all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's so weird. I don't know. I didn't do anything different. Is it still there now?
No, now it's better.
Okay, who knows? But, so I just give teachers time to really think about, what does creativity mean to them? What does critical thinking mean? And I tell them, if you want to write, have the formal definition, write a symbol. And it's just interesting to me because everyone makes sense of this in a different way. I'd have some teachers that would draw stick figures. I'd have teachers that would write a single word. I'd have teachers that would, rephrase kind of the definition I gave. And so it's just good to give some think time to teachers. Like I said, if I was doing this where we all together, I give you time to do that. And then, let's see here. Then the next thing I do is, so I have them make sense for themselves, but then I do have them get in a group and I have them make a visual representation. I tell them, I don't want the definitions written down on a poster. I know the definitions. I want you to make sense. And so this is really fun to do with staff. And it's also modeling the 4 C's, where I leave it pretty broad. All I say is it has to be a visual representation. And so some groups will do something like this, where they kind of model the same thing I gave them, where they do the boxes, and they do that. Other groups, let's see if I have pictures, like they're making waves and how they go together. And so just allowing them to kind of participate in a 4 C's activity. There's all sorts of different ways you could do this, right? So just a fun thing to do with teachers and staff. I always find this one funny. So there's a teacher in our district. She's trying to make it to 50 years of teaching and she's still fully engaged. She's 70 something. So she did her presentation and, we're like, all right, that's a light bulb, of course, creativity, that's good. And at the end she goes, man, you guys are so wrong. That has nothing to do with a light bulb. And we're like, what's that? Not a light bulb. And she goes, if you look hard enough, you might see it. And some people saw it right away. Some of you are seeing it, but that's not a light bulb. It's someone with their pants down is what she said. So there you go. There's some creativity for you on this Friday morning. And that's from the 71-year-old teacher in our district. So see it with new eyes, as she said. So it's fun to give them an opportunity to be creative instead of just, having write down definitions. All right, so now let's get into the fun part. And 4 C's throwdown. So I stole this from John Carippo. If you know John Carippo, he is the interim director of Q right now, but he's an amazing guy. And it's really to look at, like I said, what we do in our classroom. And what I hope that you guys get some ideas to bring back to your staff, to use in your classroom, whatever it is. I will say this a few times. If we do something and it scores low on the 4 C's, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, can we maybe take what we're doing and tweak what we're doing to incorporate more of the 4 C's? It just gives us a lens. And so let's see here. So what this is going to look like is when I do this with teachers, I give them this sheet and I'll pull it up and it looks like this. And what we do is we write down what the activity is, and I'll model this for you in a minute. And then you score each category. And actually, I'm glad we have the chat because I'm going to have you guys score some things in a minute. I'll let you know when. But basically every category, critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, the most you can get for each of those categories is 10. So the total, the most you can get is 40. And so, a low score on the 4 C's might be 5 or 6, high score 30, 35. And when I do this with teachers, because they work in groups when they score, is I tell them, it's not like if you're in your group and you think it's a 7 and I think it's an 8, that's not a big deal. Because we're just trying to get an idea of what we think of this activity. And what's really fun is when we have different groups do this, and one group is might have a score of a 25 and another group might have a score of an 8. It's so interesting to hear why, one group thinks it's at this level and this one this. And then like the group that's 25 points might say, well, if we just did this differently, this is how we got here. So like I said, this is just a lens. We're going to look at different activities, hopefully give you some ideas, and we'll actually score. So, like I said, 10 points for each category, total of 40. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll show you an example. Let's see here. So daily grammar. Now, maybe you do this in your classroom. When I was a principal at Stone Ridge, I was from middle school, so I came into elementary. I walk into a 2nd grade classroom. I'm like, oh, this is, maybe how we teach 2nd graders. Capitalize the J for John, put a period at the end. Students usually individually working on it. And so I'll score this one. I'll score the first couple myself just so you can get my thinking, and then I'll have you guys score so I can see your thinking. So when I'm doing this, and once again, as a teacher, you might use it differently. I'll just talk about how I saw it used. So for collaboration, teachers never had students collaborate at my school, so that would be a 0. Communication, they raised their hand sometimes to report out, but really there was 0 communication to the teacher. The teacher just sat under the overhead, so 0 for that. Critical thinking, I mean, I've done this enough. Some teachers say it is, there is some critical thinking in that. So maybe I'll give maybe I'll give the benefit of the doubt and give it a 4 just to be nice. And then creativity, I don't know what is a lot of creativity. Maybe we give it a 1. So let's say this one, it's a total of 5 points. Whatever you think, and you might have a difference of opinion, 5 points is not very high on the 4 C's, right? And then here's another typical worksheet I've seen. Oh, just circle the nouns, right? Circle the nouns. Seems like we're teaching kids nouns, but it's just not very real. And I agree with Jennifer. Yes, DWL equals PTSD. That's funny. So I agree. So what can we do differently? Everything I'm going to show you, if it's an example low on the 4 C's, I always want to show teachers, so what could we do differently? And so a lot of our teachers in our district, for like 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, they now do a picture of the day, and they do this through Google Classroom. They give kids a high interest picture, a cat with a head through bread. And then I know it's hard to see on there, but they have the students write a sentence, write a question, write 2 adjectives from this picture, 2 nouns from this picture, and then you can write a summary. And obviously it depends what grade level you'll have to adjust it. There is a template over here. Like I said, free to use, make a copy. But what's great is the way our teachers are using it is they then do have students. It's a lot. Before, when I circled a noun, right? Let me go back to this real quick. If I do this and and I do want kids to collaborate, and I say, turn to your neighbor. Well, if I say I circled box, oh, I circled box as well. That's the end of the conversation, right? There's nothing more to discuss. Where if I have more open-ended, what noun did you have for this? I didn't think of that noun, right? Adjective, is that really an adjective? There's way more discussion, way more creativity. And then some of the questions kids come up with on this stuff is hilarious. Like, even for my own enjoyment, this is way more fun than I'm circling nouns. So if I was to score this, and once again, I'm looking at potential. Doesn't mean it'll be there, but when I'm doing this, so write a summary, critical thinking on that. I actually think that could be as high as a 10. Creativity, once again, this is just my opinion, that could be a 10 because you're allowing them to get creative with their questions and their sentences and their adjectives. Collaboration, this is where we've had some discussion on this one with teachers. Some say it's not a perfect 10, but even if I give it a 7 or 8, way higher collaboration. And then let's see here, communication, critical thinking, creativity. I mean, basically, if I add this all up in my head, this is at least a 36. And you might think it's a 30, but the point is, even the teachers that thought it was a lower lot, whether it's 30, 40, some of you might say it's 40, it's way higher than daily grammar, right? And then, so, that's what we do with the younger kids. For our 5th graders, 6, 7, 8, this is a good way to do the same thing. It's called 8 Parts of Speech. Also came from John Carippo. Just give them a high interest picture. And then obviously you can see when you start talking conjunctions and pronouns, this is more for what you would do from, with middle school students. So the one thing I will tell you, having done this now with teachers in our district, you need to, we don't do this, like we don't give it right away, right? Like as a teacher, you model, you work with them multiple times, at least a week, if not 2, showing them how, like my thinking, then do some guided practice, and then move on to where they're doing it on their own. And I've actually, some teachers in our district are actually using this as their assessment now. They have them working in groups a couple days a week on this. And then because the picture's different, right? They can't just copy from the day before. On Friday, hey, here's the assessment. Let's see if we understand adverbs or whatever we're working on. So let's see here. And someone had a question about what about for ELL learners? To me, once again, this is more real because I have a conversation and I can actually have a picture in front of me, is more real than what does a noun mean on this, right? Like this doesn't have anything where for our EL students, we have a visual, and while discussion could be hard back and forth, they are getting to hear thinking behind it rather than just circle something. All right. So I'll score one, let me actually switch these. So I'm gonna talk about Genius Hour. Don't know how many of you guys have heard of Genius Hour, but basically there's a lot of ways to run it. But the main thing is you let students choose their topic. they research it, and then they have to present on it. And so when you say topic, the one thing, some advice if you do Genius Hour is the first time especially restricted. So meaning, and I know some people will disagree because you don't do that, but for example, at Stone Ridge, what we did was, hey, we're going to do something on science. And then you do need to see what the students' questions are. So you have a leading question, because if it's a question that can be answered yes, no, or just looked up on Google, it's not going to go very far. So like we had students like, is the ocean temperature rising? And so that was their original question. Yes, no, right? It doesn't get them very far. But instead we switched their question to, how does the ocean temperature rising affect wildlife or affect sea life? Totally different, right? They can spend days researching that. And so this picture actually came, it was great. One of the Genius Hour projects was they had to, these students, these were fourth graders, they had to, their guiding question was, how would you make Stone Ridge better? And they had to choose a topic, they had to research it. And I was just so impressed, these fourth graders, they then had to present to me, the principal, about what they would change at Stone Ridge. And they had researched, one of them was a garden. They wanted a garden. Here's how much it would cost. According to them, they're like, there's no legal reason we couldn't. And so it was just so fun for them to work in a group, come up with these questions, come up with a presentation, and then I had to give them feedback. And the feedback wasn't like, that idea is terrible. It was just how they presented. And so just a really fun thing. If you've never done Genius Hour, highly recommend it. And so there's some links in there as well. So I'm going to have you guys score some. We'll see if this works. Hopefully I can see your score. So STEM challenge, we're going to go ahead and score this one. So, and everyone does these differently. This is a kindergarten class, and we gave them boxes. We gave them, let's see here, it looks like paper towel rolls, gave them some styrofoam, gave them some tape, and basically just said, invent something that will help a friend. And then they did work with a partner, and then they did have to stand up and talk about it in front of the class. So go ahead and score what you would score STEM challenge. I'm just curious. So, in your head, think about, out of 10, what would I give it for creativity? Out of 10, what would I give it for critical thinking? And then just whatever your total score is, if you can put in the chat, and then we can kind of talk about it. Thanks, Brian, 34. And don't be swayed by other people. Don't be afraid to, go against the grain. 32 from Alicia. Wait for a few more. 34. 36. Cool. There they are. All right, cool. So you get the idea that a STEM challenge really allows students the opportunity to use the 4 C's, and you can structure it a bunch of different ways. What's so fun when we do these open-ended things, and I'm sure you guys know this, is it's amazing what kids will come up with. Honestly, you're like, I could have never thought of that. And these are 5-year-olds that are coming up with ideas that I couldn't. So the open-ended is great. All right, so let's now we'll score a math minute. Now, I know that picture's small, but if you've never seen a math minute, there's a few, like number 2 looks like 3-digit, triple-digit addition. Number 3 is a circle problem where you just circle what's right. Number 4, circle problem. Number 5, 2-digit, double-digit subtraction. So, and I can't see 8, looks like maybe lining things up. But so just think about what you would score that. And once again, this is where you just have to make assumptions. How would you teachers use it? But what would you score math minute? And if you've never seen that, like I said, or if anyone has questions more, I know it's hard because you have to make some guesses, right? How would a teacher use it? But just go with it so we can have the discussion. The discussion's more important than, getting hung up on, on exact numbers. We got, let's see, 10s, 15s, 6, 7, 15, 10, 12. Thank you. And I appreciate you guys participating. Makes it a lot easier for me. So for me, like I said, anytime we circle something, it just becomes people, like even if I want them to collaborate, it's really hard. There's really not a lot of discussion. Like I used to give multiple choice tests. You tell kids to, work with your neighbor. They don't even go over the problem, right? They just go, what'd you get? B, what'd you get? A. And that's the whole discussion, right? So I would say on this one, there is some critical thinking on some of those problems. I don't know if there's a ton of creativity in that because the numbers are all set, but I agree with most of you. I'd say somewhere between 10 and 15, maybe a little closer to 10. So appreciate you guys doing that. So then once again, so I present these to teachers, and a lot of our teachers in our district do this. The question is always then, that's great, I get this is low, what can I do differently? So if you guys have never heard of number concept maps, basically just, you give students a number, and so the number changes every day. So like in this one's the number 15. And so this example, I think, came from first grade, but then they make a math mountain, separated into 10 and 5. They have to make a drawing of 15, any way you want to draw 15, use 10 frames to represent, make your own word problem, make your own addition and subtraction problem, and then place what goes in the ones and tens place. So go ahead and score that one, and then where it says, will the slides be available after, I'm assuming I'm not going to take this link down, so no, as long as you have the link, it's not going anywhere. But yeah, go ahead and just score a number concept map. Once again, thinking what the potential is if I do want students to work together. Like I said, take a minute. I know it takes a minute to think about what would I give for critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration. 35, 25, 35, 26. Sorry if I miss yours, but just trying to get the idea here. 24, 30, 35. So if I'm going to average out over 30, somewhere probably around 32. Hey, and there's 32 right there. So I think once again, you have to train students to do this. It's not something you can roll out just right away. It does take teachers modeling this. But what's great is students love it because they're getting to make the word problem. They'll make some funny drawings, and really, to me, make a funny drawing. Like, as long as you're learning how to represent that number, go for it. And so it's just been really fun. And you can do this. We have middle school teachers doing number concept maps with equations. And so you can use this for any grade level. I'll actually show you. We're not going to score these, but here's some other examples, templates that you can use. But the number changes. We have also some of our 4th and 5th grade teachers. The numbers are fractions or decimals. And let's see here. Like, this is an example from middle school. So just, it's all about number concept maps, but just wanted to show you guys how this can apply. Like I said, we have kindergarten teachers doing it. Some of them too, another good idea is you put it in a whiteboard. That way you're not making copies with like the number 15 on it. And then the students on the whiteboard are just writing in the number and then showing, the whiteboard. And so, yeah, that way you're not having to make copies over and over. So, and I agree, a lot of our students who do struggle in math, I'm just reading the comment, do like this, especially because they know the routine. It's the same thing, but when I say same thing, it's not like the math man where it's the same thing, I'm getting bored with it. It's the same thing, like I know the format, but today my drawing is going to be totally different. And I've had kids tell me, wait till you see what I'm going to draw tomorrow, which always gets me a little nervous, but also it's just the fact that they're excited about doing it. It's a good thing. All right, so let's see, next thing. Amazing Race. This takes a lot of time to set up, and I apologize I don't have any resources on this, but I'll kind of give you the idea. We did this at Stone Ridge, and what you do is you get kids in teams, and they basically have different challenges at different stations, and you have teachers, and we did get some of our parent volunteers to set up stations, but basically they go around, they solve these problems, like the picture on the right, they had to do a problem with the clock, and then they get their passport stamp because they're in a race. And when we say race, so I don't want to put too much on time. Like we used to tell them, it's not about time, it's about getting them right, because there is with math, you don't want to be like, oh, it's all about time, but they work together, they have to work in groups. And so just a fun way for them to feel that they got their passport stamped, right? One station was Europe, one station was Africa, and they would get their passport stamp. But go ahead and score Amazing Race. Oh, and I like Mary Lou's suggestion on the plastic sleeve, take a picture and upload to Seesaw. Yeah, we have a lot of teachers using Seesaw, and that's a great way to record their learning, so I appreciate that. Oh, and then someone's talking about breakout boxes. Yeah, very similar idea. So,
hey, Brandon, while people are scoring, I want just let you know that you have about 5-8 minutes left on the presentation part, and then we want to leave some time for questions. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, no, that sounds perfect. I appreciate it. So a lot of 35s, 38, high 30s. I mean, you guys get the idea. It's fun. I mean, kids talked about this day, I'm not exaggerating, for over 2 weeks. Like, they were just so proud about their passport. Like, kids, and be like, you want to see my passport again? I'm like, sure, you know, you don't want to say no, but they just get excited, and they did a ton of math. I mean, this whole thing was over 2 hours. I mean, they did a ton of math that day, but they didn't care, right? I mean, they're just having a good time. So, all right, the next thing we'll score, and this, oh man, this definitely, with some of my middle school teachers, definitely put me in the crosshairs for some of them, but reading log. Now, everyone does reading log slightly different. Like I had teachers like, well, I use it differently, but think about traditional reading log. And so, and go ahead and just score, you know, kid reads a book at night, they write something down, go ahead and score your traditional reading log. I'm waiting to see if anyone's going to jump in and give, can we give it a negative number? Yeah, I'm waiting if anyone is really going to defend this. So as we go through, I mean, I will say, because I've done this enough to hear some comments where, you know, critical thinking, they say, you know, they gave it a 3 or 4, but anyway, so reading log, and this is always a funny story. So I was the kid in school who, I mean, I did whatever my teacher said. It was me. And then there's my brother who was the complete opposite. And so my brother one day saw me filling out my reading log because I did this. My school must have been like mandated. And he's like, why don't you just copy the first and last sentence of every chapter? And I'm like, what do you mean? That's not like a summary. He's like, does your teacher read that? And I'm like, well, probably not. He's like, then why does it matter? I'm like, good point. So yeah, reading log. And I appreciate the person that said, talk to your principal out of AR. I think we actually might score ARs, but reading log. So then the natural question is, because some teachers are very tied to this, as you know, is what can we do differently? And so this is just one idea. I know there's a lot of things out there, but book talks or book commercials are just an amazing way to get kids talking about books. And then the question on this, when we get to score, is, you know, is there any collaboration? So one thing we've done, one of our middle schools is great. They let kids pick books, but they try to pair them up. And so most classes have groups of 3 to 4, and they do their book talk together. So students get to choose their book, but they usually choose books where that way they can get in a group and talk about it, and they present together. And so, like I said, there's a number of ways to do book talks. There's things there, but one of the best things we did at Sunridge is we did book commercials where students stood up, and they stood up, they would present every, I forget, like every 3 weeks or so, or I forget how long the time frame was, but where the creativity came in is they could dress up like a character from it. They could have a prop, and they would basically try to sell you on why you should read their book if they liked it, or if they didn't like the book, why you should not read the book. But what was great is, I mean, kids would be practicing these monologues. They'd want to get up like, I'm not going to use notes, and a lot of critical thinking to think about, how am I going to summarize a book? And we told them, you only have a minute and a half. How am I going to summarize this in a minute and a half without giving away the ending? And that's the key. If you're going to do a book commercial or book talk, you do want to do a few examples before a kid just gives away the whole ending. Because if you don't train them on that, it gets a little interesting. But it's just been really fun. My daughter's in 5th grade at Stonebridge, and she just she looks forward to doing her book commercials because she's determined she's going to sell students on how to read their book. So I want to make sure, and I appreciate those giving scores, but there we go. Some other things. Let's see here. I want to make sure I get to the ones. There's some examples if you want different than state and capitals, like, hey, just name the states. There's a fun thing you can do with Google Maps, 2 truths and a lie. So there's a link to that. I'm going to go down to Flipgrid right here. If you've never used Flipgrid, it's a great way to get students communicating and collaborating. And so if you've never used it, just a great way. We have kindergartners in our district using it, up through our 8th graders. We're not a high school district, but it's a great way to get them. And you can limit as a teacher if you only want it 30 seconds. So sometimes we use it where we want them to synthesize their learning, to have them think about what can I really say about what I learned in 30 seconds is a lot of creativity and critical thinking. And a lot of times we put them in pairs. All right, so I know I have a little, very little bit of time. I'm going to quickly, I'll just show you an example of a book commercial. I think this is the one my daughter did. And she did this on her own on the iPad. She made it into an iMovie. And this will be the last thing I show. And we don't need to watch the whole thing, but this is, you can see where the 4 C's come in a little bit more than just like a reading log.
Brandon, I don't think we're getting sound on your videos. Is that important?
No, I'll give you the idea. I'm not going to play the whole thing. We don't need to watch the whole thing, but the whole point is that's a lot more creativity and critical thinking for her to think about, how am I going to represent he's here illegally, or how am I going to show that, the baseball, and so, or, all that stuff. So a lot more 4Cs, a lot more fun. I do want to leave time for questions. So I think, Jennifer, right, we have a little bit of time for questions.
Yes, we've got about 10 minutes left total, including questions. So you can start taking questions now, or do you want, is that where you want to wrap up?
I'll just kind of give one more final plea, and then I'll take questions, I guess, or one last, hopefully, I know most people on here probably do believe in the 4Cs, and I just always use the example of my brother. Like I said earlier, I was a student who did anything the teacher said, would sit in my desk for 6 hours if you asked me. And then my brother had a really hard time in school, but he was the kid where if he had just had more opportunities when it came to the 4Cs in school, it wasn't until high school where he finally could take electives where he could show what he was really made of. And he just struggled so bad because traditional education wasn't for him. But he's a chef now. He was actually just voted best up and coming chef in the whole Sacramento region, does amazing things. And it was always in him, right? He needed that opportunity. And unfortunately, he didn't get it until high school, like a lot of our students. And so I'm just very passionate about, if he had an opportunity in elementary and middle school to show some of those 4C skills he had, because he's way more creative than I am. He can think critically, he can do all those things, but he just needed the avenue. And I'm just really passionate about that. We have to find ways to provide opportunities for kids to incorporate the 4Cs into their learning. So yeah, I take any questions.
Okay, I see them in there, Brandon.
Yeah, definitely. So how 4Cs work been received by parents and how they've been included. And so Brian, that's a great question. I honestly didn't do this presentation until my last year at Stone Ridge. And so as far as that was my next step, was to incorporate the parents more. The one thing I didn't do it whole school, I was going to do it back to school night, is we did coffee with the principals. And so I gave this presentation to the parents then. And I mean, parents love it, because when you kind of give them that why, I think that's the big thing, because you do have parents, that are like, I just want more traditional homework and all that. When you give them the why, when you show them what do employers want, talk about like the Mentimeter thing we did, anytime you start with the why, even those that are just like, just give me more worksheets, they do recognize like, this is a skill my kid needs. So you have the skeptical parents, but then the other part of that is you have the parents who are like, please do. I mean, my kid, and I hate to stereotype, but a lot of times it's boys, right? The kids, the moms that have boys are just, they need something hands-on. So that was well received. We did a thing called Project Lead the Way also at Stone Ridge, which is engineering for elementary. And so parents, that was universally loved because it gave kids a chance to build with their hands. So good question. And then let's see here. Can you talk about ABC book? Yeah, definitely. So I always give this example on slide 49 here. This is a traditional ABC book you see a lot of schools give, where the kids trace the letter. And there actually is, if you look at research, there's benefit to young kids tracing letters multiple times, but not just one time like in this, and then color within the lines, right? Like that's not 4Cs, that's not benefiting them. Where this is an app called Book Creator. It costs $5 on iPad, and then it's actually free on Chromebooks. And kids can create their own books. And so my daughter, actually, it's interesting, she struggled at the beginning of kindergarten, and she's working on her letter sounds. And so we had her make her own ABC book. And it was just so different than me like sitting there and trying to like pound in her the letter sounds, because she was the one going around the house saying, let's see, R starts with what starts with and then like, oh, ribbon, or whatever it was. It was so much more real for her. And then after I showed the kindergarten teacher, they started doing that with their kids as well. So Book Creator is an amazing tool. Like I said, I know on the iPad it costs $5, but to me that $5 is well worth it. And it's actually free on Chromebooks. So good questions. Any other questions?
What else, guys? Anything else for Brandon before we let him go? Well, Brandon, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share this with us. I feel like I'm going to steal a lot of this presentation, so I will give Tom Blom credit though, okay, for sure. Thank you so much, guys. Let's give Brandon a virtual round of applause. Thank him for his time. And we will, his presentation I posted in the chat a number of times, but it's also on your original document. And Brandon, thank you. I know our paths are going to cross again soon.
No, I really appreciate, for all the participants, I'm a big believer. Like, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, email, actually, hopefully we can get you that as well. Whatever, I would love to help in any way that I can. So I appreciate everyone helping participate as well. Made it a lot easier.
Yay. Thank you so much, friend.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.